Have you ever found yourself looking back, maybe at a big decision, something at work or, even personally, and thinking, I totally knew that was going to happen.
hmm
Even if, well, at the time, you were actually pretty uncertain, maybe even completely surprised.
Oh, absolutely. Or the flip side, right? You confidently predict something, this is definitely how it's going to go, and then reality just throws you a curveball.
Exactly. It happens all the time, doesn't it? To everyone. Top executives, people making everyday choices. And today, we're really going to dive deep into why these moments feel the way they do, and what's actually going on under the surface.
It's fascinating stuff, that feeling, that sort of retrospective clarity or the absolute conviction in our predictions. It feels so real. But Daniel Kahneman, whose work we're exploring in Thinking Fast and Slow, shows us these are often, well, powerful cognitive illusions.
Illusions, right?
Yeah.
Not just little quirks.
No, not at all. These are deep-seated mental shortcuts, System 1 working its magic, you could say, and they profoundly shape our judgment. Sometimes for the better, sure, but often quite dangerously.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is part 3 of our journey into Daniel Kahneman's insights. And today, we're zeroing in on two really potent and often perilous parts of how we think. First, this whole issue of overconfidence, its hidden effects.
And second, something equally slippery. The subtle illusions built into the very architecture of choice, how options are presented to us.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive, we really want to unpack Kahneman's ideas about how our minds build stories about the past. Compelling stories, coherent stories, but maybe misleading ones.
Precisely. Leading to biases like the narrative fallacy and hindsight bias, we'll explore how these make us think we're much better at predicting the future than we actually are. That's the overconfidence link.
Got it.
And then critically, we'll look closely at framing, how just changing the way a choice is presented can completely flip the decision we make, often without us even noticing.
And this isn't just like interesting psychological theory for the lab.
Absolutely not.
This is about the real world. It's a pretty sobering look at the limits of our own judgment, even expert judgment. It explains why we sometimes think we understand more than we do, why we predict with certainty when we shouldn't.
And how those unchecked beliefs can lead to, well, big mistakes. Personal ones, sure, but also massive institutional failures. So let's peel back those layers.
Let's do it. Where do we start?
Well, it really starts with understanding the brain's deep-seated need for a good story. Kahneman talks about System 1, right? That fast, intuitive, automatic thinking.
Yeah, the quick gut reaction system.
Exactly. And it's not just fast, it's an incredibly powerful storyteller. It's constantly working behind the scenes, trying to make sense of everything, stitching together events, bits of info, observation.
Into a neat cause and effect chain.
Precisely.
Well,
Even
yeah.
if it has to invent connections or, gloss over the gaps, it wants coherence above almost everything else.
So it hates randomness, uncertainty.
Abhors it. A coherent story is System 1's weapon against chaos. And this drive, this need to connect the dots, leads directly to what Kahneman labels the narrative fallacy.
Okay, the narrative fallacy.
It's our tendency to build these tidy, but often overly simple, or sometimes just plain false stories about the past. We weave everything into this neat cause and effect narrative, making events seem inevitable, predetermined almost.
And ignoring.
Yeah.
What? Luck? Other possibilities?
Ignoring randomness, luck, all the alternative paths that could have happened but didn't. It cleans up the messy reality of the past.
And that's dangerous because...
Because it makes the world seem far more understandable, more predictable in hindsight than it actually was when it was unfolding. It gives us a false sense of comprehension.
Okay, give me an example.
A classic one is the overnight success myth, especially in business. Think about Walmart. Huge, dominant.
Right, you picture Sam Walton, this visionary, mapping it all out from day one.
That's the narrative fallacy talking. But Walton himself, he said, quite clearly, he had no vision of the scope of what I would start. He built it incrementally, step by step, over nearly 2 decades.
Wow, so not some grand master plan.
No, he even said Walmart was totally an outgrowth of everything we'd been doing since 1945.
Yeah.
It was messy, iterative, lots of trial and error, but our collective story, we clean it up, make it a neat tale of genius foresight.
And that's misleading for people trying to learn from it?
Hugely misleading. It makes people chase this mythical grand vision instead of embracing the hard, incremental work, the failures, the adaptations that actually build things. We end up worshiping the hero, not understanding the system, the grit, the luck involved.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's not just old school retail, right? Tech world, too.
Oh, even more so, perhaps.
Really?
Look at Google today, search engine king. Seems totally inevitable now, doesn't it? The ultimate winner-take-all story.
Yeah, it feels like they were always destined to win.
But that narrative conveniently forgets a key chapter. Before Google, Alta Vista. They dominated the search market for a while. They were the Google of their day.
I vaguely remember Alta Vista.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nassim Taleb, author of The Black Swan, even jokes he might have to replace the Google metaphor in future editions because today's giants could easily be tomorrow's Alta Vistas.
Huh. So our memory just smooths it over, erases the losers.
Exactly. Creates this coherent story of the inevitable winner, and that feeds a really biased view of how markets actually work, how unpredictable they are. We underestimate the fragility, the role of luck, shifts in tech, shifts in what users want.
Okay, that makes sense. You mentioned another example, Rockefeller.
Right, John D. Rockefeller. A fascinating case of dueling narratives. His own memoirs, they painted a very specific picture, helped humanize his image, got him praise for his philanthropy. His son even felt the money was safer in foundations because they were popular. A narrative of benevolence.
Okay, the carefully crafted image.
But then you have critics, like Ida Tarbell, a journalist who took him on. Her narrative, starkly different. She described him as utterly and almost as impersonally ruthless as a whirlwind or a torrent.
Wow. Two completely different stories from the same life.
Exactly. It shows how people, especially public figures, actively shape their own stories, and how others create equally coherent but totally different narratives based on their perspective and agenda. The Mr. Rockefeller of his autobiography versus the other Mr. Rockefeller, it forces you to ask which story is true. Or is the truth somewhere messier in between? It really shows the power and the selectivity of narrative.
Yeah, okay. So the narrative fallacy is about simplifying the past into a neat story. What about the other one you mentioned, hindsight bias?
Hindsight bias. Closely related, maybe even sneakier because it feels so natural. This is the I knew it all along effect.
Right. After something happens, it suddenly seems obvious it was going to happen.
Precisely. Once you know the outcome, your brain automatically, almost effortlessly, rewrites your memory of what you believed before the outcome was known. It aligns your past beliefs with the present reality.
So you genuinely feel like you saw it coming.
You do. It creates this powerful but totally false illusion of prediction. It's not just forgetting you were uncertain. System 1 actively rewrites the memory. Take the Ford Edsel. Remember that car? Spectacular failure in the late 50s.
Vaguely. Big fins, weird grill.
That's the one. Before the launch, though, Ford was optimistic. The ad executive felt confident about the campaign and the Edsel. They signed up 1,200 dealers, big investment, real belief.
But it bombed.
Totally bombed. And the kicker, decades later, car experts talk about it with admiration for the virtuosity displayed, meaning the effort, the ambition, and a shudder at the ultimate outcome.
A shudder.
That shudder is hindsight bias. It's now so easy to see the flaws, the styling, the marketing, the bad timing. Hindsight makes the prior confidence look foolish. But at the time, the future was genuinely uncertain.
So we don't just forget our uncertainty. We actively reconstruct the past to make it seem predictable.
Exactly. System 1 builds a story where the Edsel had to fail. It updates our internal belief based on the outcome, but then tricks us into thinking we always held that updated belief. We erase the original uncertainty. It makes learning from real prediction errors incredibly difficult.
Wow. And this happens on a bigger scale, too. You mentioned the 2008 crisis.
Oh, absolutely. A tragic, massive example. After the crash, suddenly everyone knew it was coming. It became common wisdom. The crash vindicated the warnings of Keynes, Minsky, and others about the dangers of excessive financialization.
Right. Everyone became an expert after the fact.
But here's the dark irony, the real kicker of hindsight bias. This retrospective validation conveniently spared the embarrassment of those who had extolled the value of financial services in the years before they imploded.
So the people who were actually cheering it on.
Wow. Many experts, many institutions genuinely believed in the system. They promoted its stability, its value, right up until the collapse. Only after the fact did hindsight make it easy to say, oh yeah, we saw the warnings. Warnings they'd previously dismissed or ignored.
So hindsight bias lets people off the hook.
It can, absolutely. It rewrites not just personal memory, but collective history sometimes. It prevents us from really digging into why the misjudgments happened in the first place, what biases were at play before the outcome was known. People just say, of course it was fragile and we missed the chance to learn.
Okay, so these two biases, narrative fallacy and hindsight bias, they create this illusion that we understand the past better than we do, and that it was more predictable than it was.
Exactly. And that illusion of understanding flows directly into the next big problem, overconfidence.
Right. Believing we're better at predicting and controlling the future than we actually are.
Precisely. And this is where it gets particularly dangerous, especially when it infects expert judgment, whether that's an individual expert or, an entire organization.
How does that play out? In planning, maybe.
Definitely in planning and predictions. It's a super common trap. Take military planning. There's an interesting insight from SEAL training. Young leaders often try to develop a course of action that accounts for every single possibility they can think of.
Sounds thorough. Sounds good, right?
You think so? The intention is good, cover all bases. But the result? Plans that are extraordinarily complex and very difficult to follow, they create this illusion of control through sheer detail.
But reality is messy.
Exactly. The critical lesson summed up brilliantly is the enemy gets a vote.
Huh? Okay. Meaning?
Meaning, no matter how detailed your plan, how many contingencies you think you've covered, reality, unforeseen events, the actions of others will always throw things at you that you didn't predict. Overconfidence in complex plans leads to brittle strategies. They break easily.
So complexity isn't always strength.
Often, it's the opposite. Simplicity, flexibility, the ability to adapt on the fly, that's often more robust than a rigid, overly confident master plan. You have to accept uncertainty, design for it, not pretend you've eliminated it.
Okay. What about outside the military? Entrepreneurs.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Elon Musk. Revered now, right? Visionary.
Yeah, titan of industry.
But his early days with SpaceX and Tesla, huge struggles. He started with almost $200 million of his own money, burned through more than half the money with little to show for it. SpaceX's second launch failed. Tesla was bleeding cash.
Right. I remember reading about that period. Things looked pretty bleak.
They did. The Musk glow dimmed, reporters turned on him. One gossip blog even slammed him for refusing to reconcile them with reality.
So even he faced that disconnect between vision and, well, reality.
Absolutely. It shows how incredibly hard it is to predict success, even with immense talent and drive. His eventual amazing success is actually kind of the exception that proves the rule about unpredictability. It highlights that fine line between essential self-belief and dangerous overconfidence. Most people who burn through half their capital like that, their story ends there.
Yeah, good point. What about investing? Overconfidence seems like it would be lethal there.
Oh, it's a classic pattern.
Yeah.
You often hear about the risk is gone myth. It's described as one of the most dangerous sources of risk and a major contributor to any bubble.
The risk is gone mess. How does that work?
Well, at market peaks, when everything's going up, this belief takes hold that risk is low, that this particular investment is a sure thing. It intoxicates the herd, right? People forget caution, forget the fear of loss. All they feel is the fear of missing out. FOMO.
Right. Everyone else is making money. I need to get in.
Exactly. And Howard Marks, the investor, he has some really sharp advice on this. He warns, carefree, unworried investors are their own worst enemy. And critically, being part of the herd should be a reason for worry.
Because the herd is usually wrong at the extremes.
Often driven by this collective overconfidence. True safety, Marx argues, comes from a margin of safety, a buffer against being wrong. It's a powerful point. When everyone thinks risk is gone, that's precisely when risk is probably highest. It's psychology driving the market, not just numbers.
Okay, so individual investors, the herd.
Yeah.
But this affects organizations too, right? Big companies.
Profoundly. It leads to huge blind spots, limits expert judgment inside the organization. Think about Enron. Remember them.
Oh, yeah. The energy giant that imploded.
Right. As their stock price soared, the executives were seen as brilliant. This created a dangerous feedback loop internally. The assumption became all their new ideas had to be winners. They had this aura of whiz kids who could do no wrong.
So nobody could question them.
It became incredibly difficult. And the reality, huge misjudgments. Enron Energy Services, this big bet, a pet project, failed miserably. Why? Because consumers weren't willing to go to the trouble of switching from their reliable old utility.
They misread the customer completely.
Completely. The grassroots outrage about monopoly power the CEO talked about, it simply didn't exist. It was pure projection, fueled by their own internal narrative of brilliance. They were so caught up in their own story, they didn't check reality.
And it gets worse, right? Their risk management.
Even more shocking, yeah. Their risk strategies focused on accounting performance, not economic performance. The way they framed the metrics, what they measured, led to disastrous decisions about the actual underlying risk. Deals became so complicated, even executives struggled to tell if they were legitimate.
Wow. Complexity is a shield.
Combined with the unshakable self-belief and no real challenge. A recipe for disaster. They mistook complexity for sophistication, maybe even used it to hide things.
And AIG during the subprime crisis. Similar story.
Equally chilling, maybe even bigger in scale. AIG financial products insured massive amounts of consumer loans via credit default swaps. Complex stuff.
Right.
But a private survey found the people most involved, including the Yale professor who built the pricing model, guessed their subprime mortgage exposure was maybe 10–20%.
Okay, what was it really?
95%.
95.
95% subprime. The quote is devastating. An entire financial system was premised on their not knowing and paying them for this talent.
Paying them not to know the real risk.
Essentially, it shows how even the experts, the model builders, can be completely blind. And it wasn't just AIG. Major Wall Street firms buying these things thought a Bear Stearns failure was still unthinkable just months before it happened. Collective system-wide overconfidence. Incentives rewarded ignoring the risk. A total failure of expert judgment.
That is deeply unsettling. Makes you think about expertise itself.
It does, which leads nicely to this concept called the innovator's dilemma from Clayton Christensen.
Okay, what's that?
The idea is that the very things that make a company successful, its capabilities, can also become its disabilities. Past success, built on efficient processes, specific values, deep expertise in one area.
Makes it hard to change.
Exactly. It can make the company rigid, unable to adapt to new kinds of problems or disruptive shifts. Like managers who are masters of low-cost strategies, they find it almost impossible to switch to innovation-driven strategies. They know how to manage for low cost, but not how to manage for high innovation performance.
So their expertise becomes a blind spot.
A huge blind spot. It's a kind of organizational overconfidence in the old ways. They can't unlearn what made them successful, even when the world changes around them. Their strength becomes a trap.
Is there a good example of that?
Sony and the e-reader is a perfect one. When they launched their PRS reader back in 2006, they focused intensely on the hardware, making it thin, lightweight, great screen. They were solving problems for existing e-reader users.
They thought the best device would win.
They were confident in their tech prowess. But the fatal flaw, Amazon's Kindle came along and showed that Sony lost out because it failed to attract the mass of non-customers. And why were those people holding back?
Not the device itself.
No. It was the shortage of worthwhile books, the content ecosystem. Sony was overconfident in the technology solution and totally misjudged the real market need. They optimized for current users, not the huge untapped market.
That's the difference between technology innovation and, what was it?
Value innovation. Innovation tied to what buyers actually value and will pay for. For e-readers, that was easy access to a vast library, not just a slightly thinner device. Sony's hardware expertise blinded them to the bigger picture.
Fascinating. So narrative bias, hindsight bias, leading to overconfidence. Now, what about this architecture of choice? How does framing fit in?
This is another huge piece of Kahneman's work. It shows our decisions are incredibly sensitive to how choices are presented or framed, even if the underlying options are logically the same.
So just changing the wording can change the outcome.
Absolutely. It can be subtle, almost invisible, but the impact is profound. We're just not as rational and objective as we think.
Okay, like what?
A powerful, maybe slightly controversial example is the all-R scare back in 1989. Apple's pesticide.
Right, I remember that. Big panic.
Huge panic. Paul Slovic, who studies risk perception, analyzed how a 60 Minutes broadcast triggered it. They talked about 4,000 children will die of cancer. Very definitive, no probabilities mentioned, and showed frightening pictures of bald children in a cancer ward.
Wow. Very emotional.
Extremely. And Solovic's point was, even though some statements were later challenged or shown to be exaggerated, that intense emotional framing and those vivid images drove the public response. He even argued the response was rational, given that emotional framing. Rational in terms of responding to the emotional heat, not necessarily the cold data.
So emotions trump logic when things are framed that way.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
Slovic and others like Jonathan Haidt argue that risk doesn't exist objectively in our minds. It's perceived, constructed, heavily shaped by emotion. They call it the affect heuristic.
Affect heuristic.
Yeah, basically, our gut feeling, our emotional response gives us a quick evaluation. Instead of slow, logical calculation, emotion wags the rational dog, as Haidt puts it. Your feeling about something drives your judgment, even if you think you're being logical. Think about brand loyalty, politics, even food choices based on ads versus stats.
Okay, so framing uses emotion, but it can be self-serving too.
Oh, absolutely. Adam Smith pointed this out centuries ago. He observed merchants and manufacturers always complain much of the bad effects of high wages, how they raise prices, hurt sales.
Okay, sounds familiar.
But Smith notes with a twinkle in his eye, they say nothing concerning the bad effects of high profits. They are silent with regard to the pernicious effects of their own gains.
Huh, so they frame the problem to blame someone else.
Classic self-serving framing. Blame external factors like labor costs, ignore internal factors like their own profit margins. It's a fundamental human tendency. Frame the issue to suit your own interests, make yourself look good, avoid accountability, make subjective discussion really hard.
And this framing, this architecture of choice, can it be used more? Intentionally? Manipulatively?
That's a real concern. Think about systems that create closed loops of control, especially ones operating outside the realm of politics and individual volition. Systems working in stealth, nudging our behavior through automatic psychological responses.
Like algorithms, maybe?
Or subtle marketing.
Could be. The danger some critics raise is that this subtly tips the self-other balance toward the pseudo-harmonies of the hive mind. It potentially erodes our inwardness, that space needed for independent thought, autonomous action, moral judgment. It can suffer and suffocate.
That sounds quite dystopian. Undermining autonomy through choice architecture.
It's a serious critique that the design of our information environments, our choice environments, can subtly manipulate us towards conformity, towards obedience, rather than critical thinking and individual conviction.
Hayek worried about something similar, didn't he? With collectivism? He did. He warned that collectivism could replace independence, self-reliance, and the willingness to bear risks with a demand for obedience, making individuals just do what the collective decides is good. It removes the space for individual moral choice, for pushing back based on personal values.
Okay, so we're susceptible to narrative fallacies, hindsight bias fuels overconfidence, and the way choices are framed can manipulate us. It sounds like we're doomed. What can we actually do about it?
Well, recognizing the biases is the crucial first step, right? Awareness. But the next step is actively, consciously designing systems and our own approaches to foster better judgment. Mitigating these effects, not just noticing them.
How? Where do we start?
A huge part, maybe the hardest part, is committing to clarity and truth. Really prioritizing objectivity, Ray Dalio puts it bluntly. The biggest mistake most people make is to not see themselves and others objectively.
To get trapped in our own perspective.
Exactly. He says successful people learn to go above themselves, see things objectively, and really take in the perspectives of others instead of being trapped in their own heads with their own biases. It's about detaching from your ego.
That sounds difficult.
It is. The challenge Dalio poses is personal. Are you willing to fight to find out what's true? Not to seek confirmation, but actively seek out honest, even painful feedback that challenges your beliefs or reveals your flaws.
So embrace the discomfort.
Embrace the discomfort for the sake of accuracy. Dalio reckons becoming truly open-minded takes about 18 months of deliberate practice. It's not just saying you're open-minded, it's rewiring your habits, consciously battling System 1's defaults.
Okay, fight for truth. What else? How do we structure choices better?
Focus on outcomes, not just activity. Outcomes, not activities, shape your choice. You absolutely have to know what success looks like in real, measurable terms.
Otherwise, you're just busy, not effective.
Exactly, like that example of the dev team deluged with feature requests, but having no clear sense of whether any of the changes mattered to customers. Busy, 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 but maybe achieving nothing of value. Focusing on activity creates an illusion of progress, feeds overconfidence and effort rather than impact. You got to know if you're doing the right things, not just doing things right.
Okay, focus on outcomes. What about frameworks for making decisions?
Peter Drucker, the management guru, had some great rules for effective executives that hit these biases head on. One was periodically review your decisions.
Don't just make them and forget them.
Right. Check back 6-9 months later, especially on big ones like hiring or promotions. Drucker noted only about a third of those are truly successful. And if the results aren't good, assume you made the mistake, not the person, not circumstances, you.
Ouch. That forces you to look at your own process.
Exactly. It combats hindsight bias. Oh, they were obviously wrong for the job, and fosters real learning. You have to analyze your criteria, your biases, your interview technique. No easy scapegoats.
That takes real discipline. What else from Drucker?
Always ask the foundational question. What is right for the enterprise? Not what's right for me, my department, or this quarter. What's right for the whole organization long term. Cuts through personal bias, politics, short-term thinking. It's a compass.
A compass for choice. I like that.
And then translate decisions into action. Develop clear action plans. Define accountabilities. And foster a we mindset, not an I mindset. Think and say we. This shares responsibility, combats individual overconfidence.
Makes sense. He also mentioned meetings.
Yeah, running productive meetings. He admired Alfred Sloan at GM. Sloan would listen, clarify, then immediately send a memo summarizing the discussion, the conclusions, who does what, by when, who's accountable.
Super structured.
Incredibly, it eliminates ambiguity. Ambiguity is where misjudgment and overconfidence love to hide. This structure leaves no room for, oh, I thought we decided something else.
Okay, structure helps. What about our internal approach, how we choose our responses?
Stephen Covey offers a powerful perspective here. Proactivity. Values-based choice. He famously said, between stimulus and response is our greatest power, the freedom to choose.
Our freedom to choose our response.
Exactly. Our behavior isn't just determined by our conditions or our feelings, it's a function of our decisions. We can choose to subordinate feelings to value, respond based on principles, not just react emotionally.
Can you give an example?
His example about love is potent. A husband says the feeling is gone. Covey's advice, love her, meaning act lovingly. Love is a verb, he says. The feeling of love is the fruit of the action. So love her, sacrifice, listen, empathize, appreciate, affirm her.
Choose the action, even if the feeling isn't there initially.
Right, it frames choice as this active internal power. We can rise above reactivity, make deliberate choices aligned with our deepest values. It's about agency.
That resonates. And linking back to feedback,
Yeah.
how does that fit in?
Well, giving good feedback is crucial for checking those blind spots, puncturing unearned overconfidence. The radical candor approach emphasizes this. Giving guidance, both praise and criticism, is often profoundly uncomfortable, but essential.
How do you make it effective?
State your helpful intention first. I'm saying this because I want you to succeed. That can lower defenses. And then, crucially, show, don't tell.
Be specific.
Super specific. Not, you were unprofessional, but when we were in that meeting and you passed that note, Elliot saw it, it pissed him off. Concrete examples. That's what helps people actually see the behavior and correct it. Vague feedback lets system one rationalize it away. Specificity cuts through the self-delusion.
Okay, specificity is key. Is there one more approach to choice architecture?
Yes, a really interesting one from Roger Martin. Integrative thinking.
It's integrative thinking.
It's about what highly successful leaders do when faced with two conflicting, seemingly mutually exclusive options, and either choice where both sides have merit.
They don't just pick one.
No. They refuse resolutely to choose between those existing alternatives. Instead, they work to build a new model that is superior to both, but contains elements of each.
So they create a third option, synthesize something new?
Exactly. They transcend the binary. They don't accept the limits of the existing frame. The solution isn't in the given choices. It's created by going beyond them. It's an active process of innovation, finding a both hand instead of settling for either. It leads to more robust, creative solutions.
Wow. Okay, that's a much more advanced way of thinking about choice.
It really is. It requires rejecting the easy path and engaging in some serious System 2 effort.
So wrapping this all up, quite a journey through our mental shortcuts and biases.
It really is. We've seen how our minds desperately want coherent stories about the past, the narrative fallacy,
Which makes things seem more predictable than they were hindsight bias.
leading directly to overconfidence in our ability to predict and control the future, believing we know more than we do.
And we saw how that plays out dangerously, even for experts in huge organizations like Enron or AIG.
Right. And then there's the whole architecture of choice, how just framing an option, appealing to emotion, using specific words, can fundamentally change the decisions we make, often without us even realizing it.
So Kahneman's big message seems to be wary of your intuition. System one is powerful but flawed.
Wary, yes, but not dismissive. System 1 is brilliant for many things, but overriding its biases, especially in high-stakes situations, requires that hard, deliberate work of System 2.
It takes humility, objectivity, consciously designing how we approach choices.
It's not a one-time fix. It's an ongoing practice, like strengthening a muscle.
Yeah.
You have to keep working at it.
So a final thought for everyone listening. If overconfidence really stems from that gap, that difference between our best estimate of probability and how confident we feel about it, maybe ask yourself, what deeply held facts or inevitable truths in your own life, your career, maybe your relationship, maybe your view on world events, what might actually be just a well-constructed narrative, a story you tell yourself.
A story that shields you, perhaps, from a more complex, maybe more sobering, but ultimately more accurate reality.
Yeah. What would it take for you to genuinely question that story? To peek behind the curtain and embrace the messy, unpredictable truth?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Food for thought.